we're going to have 5 different, we'll say lists. They're lists. There's really no better way to frame it. We're going to have 5 different lists associated with not only this year's free agent class, but just bigger picture lessons and takeaways from previous free agent classes. And we're going to start today with what you don't want to do. Today's show is 10 mistakes that we want to see teams avoid in this year's free agency period that they have not avoided over the last few years. The typical pitfalls associated with this time of year that we want to dig into today. All right, what's your next one?
My next one is you're paying for snaps and not luxury players. And what I mean by that, and there's a couple ways I mean by this, but really you're paying for guys that are going to be on the field and give you plus play. And so when you look at a dollar count amount, and I think our example that we came up with the pre-show, and I'll just use it right now, is Orlando Brown, a ton of money at left tackle. You're paying him a premium price, top end price, potentially. That's what it seems like. The Chiefs said today that they're not tagging him. So that looks, there's probably a market now. Is if you pay for that for what I consider an above average left tackle, wouldn't you want to break that up in some way and differently amongst other players to pay, basically say he gets $20-something million. Can we find 2 or 3 guys in that $24 million range and that plays snaps? Snaps matter. Snaps and first downs are kind of the numbers I'm going to look at for a lot of players. And I think that's where value comes, because if you're on the field affecting the game positively, that matters. And if he's an above average player, but you're playing premium price, you're not getting a lot of value out of that. But if you pay 2 or 3 guys who are above average, paying them decent market rate prices, that adds up.
And the Bills have done a very good job of it over recent years. You know, the Bills team building model of we're going to use free agency to plug holes. You know, it's going to be Daquan Jones and guys like John Brown and mid-tier offensive linemen. That's mostly what they've done. Even guys like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, when they signed them, those were monster deals. Those were modest contracts that they used to find multiple starters in free agency. So use free agency to plug holes, not look for the true game-changing players on your roster. The problem is, in that Bills model, they haven't found the game-changing players through the draft. That's what you have to do if you're going to follow this model. But I do think that is the ideal way to build your team. What's your next one?
My next one is injured players stay injured unless you have the 2000s Phoenix Suns training staff, and that's can get Grant Hill to play 80 games a year and all that. They're signing their own players here, but like the Chargers with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, both great players, but they miss a lot of time and you're paying them a lot of money and they're not on the field. It's that double whammy. So now you're giving snaps to worse players while also like paying most of your cap to those types of players that should be on the field. So it's that double whammy. Other one last year was Randy Gregory. Randy Gregory has battled injury issues in college. He battled injury issues throughout his time in Dallas, amongst other things. Denver pays him and he's not on the field a lot. And yes, he's a plus player, a good player, but there's just that opportunity cost with that is most injured guys kind of stay injured. If that's their history, it's called an injury history. You know, it's not an injury one-off. You know, some guys, yes, you have the freak injury, but that matters. Is playing those snaps and earning the contract matters so much in so many ways, shape, and form.
Marcus Davenport's another good example.
Yeah,
that's a great example where if you talk yourself into the upside of it,
and I totally could. I could see why you would do it, but then he's
guys that talented don't typically hit free agency. It's like, oh man, if this hits, like what could it look like? All right, well, if it doesn't, you're paying $18 million a year for somebody who can't get on the field for you. All right, my next one here. You are not special. The mega off-ball linebacker contract that you're about to sign is not going to work out for you.
Make him feel special.
But he's not special, Mother.
This is the scene from Arrested Development over and over and over again, where, I mean, just the list is brutal, okay? I know CJ Mosley had a nice season, but CJ Mosley is making a lot of money this year.
A lot of money.
And there's a chance that Quincy Williams walks because of how much they're paying guys like CJ Mosley. Foye Oluokun, the contract that he signed last year. I know he had a lot of tackles, but this is a team whose run defense was abominable at the end of the season with a guy making $20 million a year, $19 million a year as an off-ball linebacker.
Shaq Leonard is a great example of that. I know they're signing their own guy, but still, like, they gave him an extension, but you're giving them money. I know, not free agency, but still.
Those deals, again, they can go south very, very fast. And it's just, we're talking about mistakes you want to see teams avoid. That's what I want to see teams avoid.
Yes, absolutely. My last one. and this is kind of a tie-in from kind of like previous points we've been making on this, but beware the name brands when you can whip something together from the bottom shelves. Like when you can find, rather than paying, you know, the top market price for somebody and just whipping together, hey, the mercenary pass rushers, and finding guys, or trying a guy like my guy, Obo Okronkwo. Yeah.
I don't know. That one I don't know.
I think I got it, but from the guy with the Texans last year and the Rams before, this is my whole argument about the Millsap doctrine. This is the guys that Nwasu, like, hey, find these guys that are in the margins that you're okay. I'm paying them $9 million and a 2-year $20 million deal. You know, something where it's like, if you break out, we're betting on that. I'd much rather take a chance on those types of players that might be ascending. Byron Murphy might be a little more expensive than that, but as far as at least pass rushers and other positions, the guys that might be ascending, as opposed to guys that I'm going to pay, you know, upper middle class price here that really you're not getting any value out of. This was my argument for Kendrick Bourne a couple years ago, but the Patriots went out and gave him big money, and it kind of ruined it for me. So, or decent price on it, but also just piecing together, you know, again, this is the mercenary pass rush discussion. The Justin Houstons, the Melvin Ingrams, the Fletcher Coxes of the world. Clowney is now in this type of part of his career. Arden Key, you know,
Arden Key is a good example.
Yeah, Yannick Ngakoue like might be in this part of his career now, just a gun for hire year after year. Like that's shopping in this lane as opposed to just the one big star price. Just because a guy doesn't have name recognition doesn't mean they're still not the same type of tier of player. That's just something. And it's funny, and I'm not talking to people listening to the show. This is what teams do all the time. Well, this guy was a first round pick. You know, they do this all the time. But just because the guy doesn't have the name that you remember, even for me, mispronouncing half the names, it's just that they're still good players or give you the same level of production. It doesn't matter what the name is on his back or what his draft pedigree is. Production is production.
All right, my last one here. Beware the 1 year wonder. Okay. And this happens at a lot of different positions. The one that I just can't get out of my head, and this is kind of a corollary to what you mentioned earlier, was Nelson Aguilar. Yeah. Where Nelson Aguilar was available for nothing when he signed with the Raiders a few years ago. And then he has that big year with the Raiders and he pops, and the Patriots give him all that money.
So much money.
Just look at the last few years. Just do it over 2 years. Do it over 3 years. Like, what is a guy really? Season's only 16, 17 games long. That 1 year can lie to you. Listen to a guy when he tries to tell you what he is over a multi-year period. This is weirdly kind of what I'm coming back to with the Daniel Jones thing. Like, just listen to it.
Yeah.
Unless you have a really good reason for why he's a different player than he was in the past. And maybe we do with Daniel Jones. I just don't know if we do. I just think that you run into issues and you create problems when you do it this way. And I just want to see teams avoid that. Like, let's do it over multiple years. Nick Foles is going to be out of the league. The Jags signed Nick Foles to a 4-year, $88 million deal with $45 million guaranteed based on like one playoff run.
Oh, man. That's their guy. Hey, that's the needle mover.
Just don't tell yourselves a story about one season or one stretch of games, or just be realistic about what guys are. And don't talk yourself into, he could become this.
Right.
You know, I just think that is a dangerous way to live.
Do outliers hit? Yes. But I live in a city that's built on people thinking they can hit on the outlier. I literally live in every building around me was built on people betting on outliers that didn't hit. And that's why they could be built. And I think that's something that you're betting on outliers. It's going to be a losing proposition. Sometimes they do hit? Yes. But that's even my one little tiny example is like Devondre Campbell. The Packers got him off the waiver wire essentially, and then all of a sudden he plays plus football for him, and then they give him a deal. Yes, they can get out of it. It's not that crazy of a deal, but they still paid him, and that's still something they have to fix and figure out when they're paying other players now. So that is it. It's 1 year wonders are a very, very scary proposition unless you're really talking yourself into it, and then it's even scarier.